Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going over my March wrap up, what I'm currently reading, and a loose April TBR. So let's get started. So I first read Scot and Bothered by Alexandra Kiley. I gave this one 3 stars. The general premise is it's a dual timeline story where we're following Brooke Sinclair and Jack, whose last name I can't remember right now. Brooke is an expat from the United States going to the University of Edinburgh. She's studying to become a writer, and her favorite writer also happens to be her mentor and a teacher at this school, or a professor. She meets Jack at her friend's party, finds out he's his roommate, and then later finds out that Jack and her friend are going to be TAs in a class she is taking, but Jack will not be her TA. So that's the first storyline, right, where we're initially meeting them. And then the second timeline is present day. Brooke is a ghostwriter, and she's not really loving her job. She wishes that she was writing on her own and writing like original content, and she has been asked to co-write with her mentor, so like her name is going to actually be on the byline or on the author title line, her mentor's like memoirs, essentially, specifically about this trail on Skye that she like founded essentially, and she needs to go actually take the trip. She needs to go hike this trail on Skye because the feedback she's been getting on her writing is that it's just not feeling lively. It's not feeling like she's experienced it, and it's because she hasn't. So they're like, hey, you should go on this trip. However, we would really like you to go with somebody because the photographer for this book went on the trip and ended up breaking both of his legs. It can be a dangerous trip, so you shouldn't go alone. In saunters Jack. Now, it is very clear from the tension in the room that these two have not seen each other in a very long time. I don't know if he knew that she was working on the book, but she did not know that Jack was a replacement photographer for the book. And initially she's trying to get out of the trip, and then Mari, her mentor, was like, you guys, I would really feel more comfortable if you guys went, and I knew you were taken care of, like, please just go with him on this trip. What I really liked was the hiking trip. I feel like it was really well described. I felt like I was on the trip with them at times. I also really loved the space that this hiking trip gave them to kind of start to try to hash out their issues. It also created a lot of good tension and sometimes negative tension. And I also really enjoyed the side characters that came along because they would challenge each of them in different ways. What I didn't love is that this book is very clearly a second chance romance, which is one of my favorite tropes. But from the beginning, you're wondering, like, why? Why did these two break up? They clearly have great chemistry, and as you're seeing from the before time, these two can't keep their hands off of each other. So it doesn't really make any sense as to like why they're not together anymore, and we don't find out the reason for their breakup until the 80% mark. And I personally didn't think it was a good enough reason for them to break up. I could understand her being mad, but it's like the whole thing, I was like, you guys should have just talked and it would have been fine. It was a little much, and it was a little too late for me when they finally get all the resolution going. I honestly feel like a rearranging of the timeline, and I don't even need the full story as to why they break up, but if you just gave me the crux of it, let's say day 2 of the hiking trip, because it was like a 5-day trip, if you had just given me like a little bit of it in the beginning, I would have been way more into them working through their things. And it was just, there was a lot to be desired. I think this is a debut. It kind of reads like one, and I will be interested in seeing what Alexandra Kiley has to do with later, like with her newer releases. Not newer. Well, I mean, anything after this will be newer. But whatever she releases next, I will give it another shot just to see if maybe this particular book just had, a little bit of a debut struggle. But I feel like overall I really enjoyed the pacing of the writing. I enjoyed her writing style. It was just the choice of timeline, along with some of the conflict that I didn't love. So after Scot and Bothered, I read The Love Lyric by Christina Forrest, and I had a very good time with this. I gave it 4 stars. So we're following Iris Green, who is the eldest daughter of the Green sisters. There's 3 books, and they each follow one of the sisters, and this is Iris's story. So Iris is an executive at Save Face Beauty. She also is the single parent to a 6-year-old because her husband suddenly passed away when their daughter was like 6 months old or something like that. Very tragic. You get more details in the story. And then also just trying to be there for her parents who are kind of getting older in age, and they run a floral shop that like the whole family loves, but they're just having a hard time running it at this point. So there's a lot going on, and she's only one person, but she's the eldest daughter, so of course everyone's looking to her for, her support. And then we have Angel, who is the male main character of the story. He is a famous like pop star, but he wants to be an R&B singer. Like when he writes his music, because he writes pretty much everything he makes, it's always on like that slower, more sensual like R&B side. But his first single really popped off was a more pop R&B, and so his label really wants him to kind of stick in that lane, even though it's not what he loves. And they've met several times. So I think at the end of book 1, they first meet at Iris' sister, whose name I can't remember right now, the middle sister, is Angel's stylist. And he was at what was supposed to be her wedding that turned into just like a singles party. And then he meets Iris again a couple of times. And her sister's like, hey, Iris has been through a lot, so don't feel bad if she blew you off and like it isn't seeming interested. Like she's got a lot going on. So he's really respectful about it. He's like, cool, I'm just going to do me. And he's always kind to her when he sees her and engage with her. And he obviously clearly likes her, but he's going to respect the boundaries that are there. They end up on a campaign trip together for Save Face Beauty. Iris was not originally supposed to go on this trip, but things happen, of course. And it's a romance novel, so who doesn't love some forced proximity? And these two get forced into the same space on this trip, and a lot kind of happens through that. And generally speaking, I really enjoyed it. The things that I liked is we got a really great view of Iris's life, the amount of weight that she just holds in her family and at work. And I love how Angel very much was like, I love that you take care of everyone else, but who's taking care of you? And he starts to really take care of her across this trip, and is very much I know you can do all of this by yourself, but please let me help. I love that so much. That was great. What I didn't love was the general pacing of the book. It felt kind of long at times. I think it's 350 to 375 pages, but at times it felt really long. And the other thing that I really struggled with, and I think this is why the pacing felt off to me, was Angel's story. He has a really complex relationship with his family and religion. And I just feel like those things were partially explored. And I don't think that every subplot like that needs to be like perfectly tidied up in a bow, but it just felt like he was just an accessory to Iris because those things don't really get completely taken care of. One of them kind of does, but I just still felt unresolved at the end of it, and I didn't love that feeling. So let's move on to what is very easily my favorite book of the month, and that is Promise Me Sunshine by Miss Cara Bastone. I feel like I've talked about this so much across my Instagram and my TikTok, but I'm finally coming to talk to you about it. I loved this book so much. So it starts out really sad, obviously. Lenny lost her best friend Lou, who is also really her soulmate, to a battle with cancer. And Lenny's absolutely reeling. She can't bring herself to go home to the apartment they shared in New York City. So she will work during the day doing like temporary nanny jobs, and then will go to like an all-night rave, or she will take the Long Island ferry out and back just like all night long, sleep on the subway. Like, she's just really struggling. One of her friends, I think, recommends her to a family who needs a nanny for the weekend. It's kind of like a last-minute situation. And normally she only does short-term gigs, but she's like, you know what? I can get through a weekend with this kid. Like, I'm going to meet her. It's going to be fine. And so she goes. She meets the mom. She meets Ainsley, the little girl. And then she meets Ainsley's uncle, Miles, who is not so sure about her being left with this little girl all weekend. And you can tell that he doesn't feel like he fully has a say in her being left there. But he really isn't comfortable either. So he also stays for the weekend. And honestly, he's kind of silently judging her throughout the whole weekend. And he comes off as kind of a douchebag. But then he keeps running into Lenny after this initial babysitting gig is over, and she decides that she's going to help out a little more with the family. And he learns about her grief and about losing Lou, and then shares with Lenny. He's like, I have been through this a couple times over. I have been where you are. Please let me help you. And so he just starts to say yes to things. Look, she'll say, fine. Okay, well, I'm going dancing. He's like, okay, let me get my jacket. And she's like, what the heck is going on? And he just becomes like her giant emotional grief teddy bear. It's so sweet. One of the plot lines is that she and Lou made this list of things for them to like really live again, like once the cancer was over. And so she's trying to like work her way through that list, and he's been helping her. And this book was so good. I highlighted so much, so much, so many great comments on grief itself, but then also what it looks like to love someone so deeply that is your friend, and then what it looks like to like morph your friendship with someone into romance. This is not a romance heavy book at all. They are friends for 90% of it, and it is so good. It's so good. I cannot recommend it enough. Obviously check the content warnings, and if dealing with grief directly like that is hard for you, this is not going to be it for you. But if you have even a passing interest in something like that, I cannot recommend this enough. So after that giant grief book, I needed something a little lighter, right? I needed sports romance. So I went with baseball because opening day is happening. And I read Pass Ball by Lo Everett. I got the chance to ARC read this actually, so thank you so much to her for sending that to me. So this follows Xavier, who is the catcher for the Denver Bandits. This is the final book in the Denver Bandits baseball series, which is so crazy to say. I cannot believe it. And he finds out, literally I think on page 2, that he's going to be a dad. It's with this girl who treated him terribly, and he cannot believe he was in that relationship for so long. And he tells her, I'm in this with you. I'm going to help you raise this baby. I'm so excited to be a dad, but you and I are not going to be together. So like, you decide what you want. He's essentially giving her an out if she does not want to be a part of this kid's life. And he's like, figure out what you want and like, come tell me. And he's like, I will financially help with what you need. Like obviously with like doctor's appointments and getting baby stuff and all of that. So he very quickly becomes a single father because this girl does not want to be a mom. And that's also kind of a subplot, is trying to figure out what's going on with her because she just disappears, which is fine and dandy for day-to-day life, but from a legal standpoint is not so much because she could just pop up at any point and decide she wants to say. And so he's trying to figure that out. It's summer, I think, when this happens. No, it's winter, early spring. They're not in season yet. Baseball is so long. I was trying to think of when this starts because I was like, well, spring training is like late February, March, and then you go into opening day in April, and then it's through to October. So somewhere between November and February, this book is taking place in the beginning when you find out that he's a single dad. And he realizes that season's about to start, and he's struggling because he cannot seem to keep a nanny around. So he's at this event at the field for a nonprofit that I think Dean, one of his teammates, owns and like runs with the director of the nonprofit. And the director's like, you're late. I have buses full of kids who are going to be here any minute, ready to, run through essentially like a baseball camp with you and your team. And I need your head to either be in it or I need you off my field. And he's like, okay, number one, fuck off. Number two. And he's like obviously very protective of his kid. And he's like having this whole thing happen. He's kind of having a meltdown. And he's trying to figure out what the hell to do. Because his nanny literally quit, like, while they were on the field. She just, like, left. It was a whole thing. So the director of the nonprofit, Vivian, who is our FMC, calls her niece, Tenley, who is, like, 19 or 20, to come watch the baby. And Tenley has plenty of babysitting experience, CPR certified, all that good stuff. So Xavier reluctantly hands his precious little baby over to her, goes to change and, like, be a part of it. He's like, what just happened to me? So we get a couple of more instances of that, of them running into each other, of Tenley becoming his daughter's like semi-permanent nanny, which then brings him and Vivian together because she's very protective over Tenley and making sure that Tenley stays in school. Tenley, I think, is the first person in their family with the choice to go to college. No, I know Vivian went to college, but I feel like something happened there. But she's very protective over Tenley getting to like stay in school and like study and focus. And so she's like, yeah, she's not in school right now. So yes, she can be at your house, every day while you're at practice and, fine for away games. But you need to figure something out when school's back in session because she's not gonna be able to do that all the time. And so he agrees. But then they start running into each other more because he also starts volunteering at the center where the nonprofit is run out of, and it's kind of like a safe haven for a lot of these kids. And we find out more about Xavier's background, and he definitely needed that as a kid, and baseball was kind of his saving grace. So a lot of interaction there. All that to say, they enter into not quite a fake dating because everyone knows that they're together, but they're not in a committed relationship. This is very much a situationship. He overhears a conversation where she essentially says that she's like basically never been sexually satisfied by a partner, and he offers to help her through that. And he says, my daughter and baseball are my number 1 and 2 priorities. I do not have room for a relationship. And if you don't want a relationship and all you want is a good time, I'm your man. And she's like, yes, I don't believe in relationships. Let's do this. And so they talk rules and boundaries, which I loved. And then he's like, make me a list of all the things you want to do. And then they just start working their way through that list. I loved that whole concept. I loved watching her sometimes step in to help with his daughter. I love watching her relationship with Tenley, her niece, who is honestly kind of like her little sister / daughter. There's a whole backstory to that. But I do feel like this book was entirely too long. It was 460 pages. It felt like it was well over 500 pages. And there was just so much where I was like, oh, we could have cut this. And a lot of it felt superfluous. It wasn't even like we were getting a bunch of scenes with like the other players' wives or girlfriends, because obviously she gets brought into the girl group. There were just a lot of moments where I was like, did we need this? And I also really hated the third act conflict. It felt so unnecessary. It's not even a breakup with them. It's like another thing, but it just felt stupid to me. It was one of those things where I was like, we had a first pass at this 200 pages ago, and it would have been fine to leave the resolution with what happened there. We didn't need this moment. Like, that just felt kind of gross to me. Not gross. It felt off. It felt kind of off to me. And I just didn't understand the point, and it just kind of dragged the story out. And it honestly made the ending bumpier than it needed to be. So those are my thoughts there. So after Pass Ball, I moved on to another arc that I had, Early 30s by Josh Duboff. Thank you so much to the publisher for sending that to me on NetGalley, approving that. So the premise of this one is it's very millennial, literally in the title, Early 30s. So we have Victor and Zoe, who are in their early 30s, living in New York City, trying to make their like respective careers just like work for them. Zoe works at a fashion startup in kind of a toxic environment. Victor has just landed a job at a like coveted magazine doing celebrity profiles and like reviews and things. One of the things I think is going to be hard for people is the way this story opens. Victor is in the hospital for something. Check the content warnings. And it's one of those things where, because it's a literary fiction leaning story, it's not going to have the laundry list of content warnings like we would have in like an indie romance. So you'll definitely want to log on to like Goodreads or the Storygraph or Fable or whatever to like look at those before you dive in, I would say. But I feel like everything was handled in just a very millennial way. But I mean that positively as a millennial. I felt Victor's struggles. I also felt the times when he was being super over the top, and when Zoe would struggle with that, and also her need to always be there for him, even when it was detrimental to her. I just really loved that look at their relationship. None of this was rosy. None of it was rose-colored glasses. It also has kind of like a Love Actually bend to it, where we will randomly get these chapters from different side characters, and the side characters are connected, but then they also almost always loop back into Zoe and Victor, and I really enjoyed that as well. I felt like it was very easy for me to emotionally tap into where they were, and I really liked that. I recognized a lot of things in the story thematically. I felt like it did a really good job of explaining like general millennial culture, internet, podcast wise, things like that, without making like overt references to things in our world. Like, it was just removed enough that if someone said, hey, I want a book about what it's like to be an early 30s millennial and like, you know, the 2017 to 2025 kind of time frame, and they go, oh yeah, here you go, and it would feel realistic. So I enjoyed it. Okay, so after this, I got really lucky, and my library hold for Everything Is Tuberculosis by John Green came in just 1 week, and so I listened to the audio in one late afternoon evening. John Green is best known for his YA novels, but for those of us who have been fans with him and his brother Hank for a long time, know that YouTube is a thing that they have lived on since literally 2007. Doing the Vlog Brothers, but then they also have this other channel, which I forget what it's called right now, where they do a lot of like science-y kind of things on it, and they discuss all sorts of things, and that's why it was not shocking to me when John Green came out with a tuberculosis book, because of course John Green would come out with a tuberculosis book. So it literally is him following a family in somewhere in Africa. I cannot think of the country right now, but I will pop it up on the screen when it inevitably hits me 2 hours from now. And he's just with them, he's going to like a hospital there that has a tuberculosis unit. He's also talking to the family about what it's like to have a sick child in the hospital, but then you also have to leave to go work, take care of your family, do things like that. What it means to live with tuberculosis in their community and how the community treats people. But he also talks about things like the American pharmaceutical system and why we charge so much for medication in countries like Africa, despite the fact that we will charge a quarter of the price here in America. He talks about how everything is connected and why when we make humanitarian choices, they're also often economic choices, and they're often also political, geopolitical, all sorts of things. But he does it in such a way that it doesn't feel aggressively preachy. It doesn't feel like someone handed you an encyclopedia and said, hey, read on all the problems of the world. It felt really approachable, and he did it in a way that did not feel like pandering, like bite-sized little morsels, but it also was really easy to like pause and reflect on something he would say. And so I just had the best time. I'm giving this 5 out of 5 stars. Solid Midwestern dad energy from John Green. Attaboy. Way to go. Okay, so the last book that I read in March was Just for Our Luck by Denise Williams. I had such a fun time with this romance. It was so cute. So we're following Sybil Sweet, who has always felt like she's been lucky, but she's kind of down on her luck right now. She loses her job right in the beginning of the book, and she's just feeling really rudderless and like she doesn't know what she's doing. Her mom and stepdad, she's living with them right now, and they're like, what's going on? What's your next step? What are you doing? And they're supportive of her, but they also are wary because she does kind of flit from thing to thing. And then we have Kieran, who is an aspiring doctor, has put his medical school status on pause so that he can move home to take over the family donut shop because his grandfather just had a big medical scare and he's recovering. And so he's just there to help while this is happening. And him and Sybil have this sparkly meet cute on a late night in the donut shop. They hook up and she leaves him like a thanks note essentially on the back of a lottery ticket in which she turns out to be the winner. But he doesn't have her number. He doesn't have her last name. And he's talking to his sister about it, who's also been helping out in the shop. And he's telling his family, he's like, I cannot turn this ticket in. Like, I have to do the right thing. I have to get this back to her. And his sister's like, well, what if we put a thing out on, like, Instagram or TikTok or something? And so they do, and he's describing her. Actually, I think maybe it was on the news. I can't remember, but it's like a public display of, like, trying to get this woman's attention. And he just seems so enamored with her and just so smitten, and everyone can tell except him. It's so funny to me. And so they kind of reunite and then decide to fake date because Sybil's life is a mess and she has been telling her family that she's been dating a man who is different than all the other ones she's previously dated because her sister's getting married and she needs to take someone to the wedding and she wants to seem like she's starting to get her life together. And then Kieran is wanting, well, he needs a lot of things and he doesn't want any money from her, but she refuses and she's like, no, like, I'm going to help. But what he really needs is for the donut shop to be successful enough to help, them pay off debts that they have, the medical bills, things like that, him trying to pay off school and whatever. And since they've kind of had this local viral moment with the initial video, they decide, okay, we'll just keep it up. And they do, and both of them wrestle with some heavy things throughout this book. But I love how it was handled. I love how immediately supportive they are of each other. Sybil is often kind of the butt of the joke in the family. And they're not doing it to be hurtful, but it does hurt her. And so I just love that even when she's with him and she tries to be self-deprecating, he will stop her and, like, look her in her eye and say, like, you don't have to be the butt of the joke. Like, you don't have to make fun of yourself for me. I think you're smart. I think you're great. I think you're so wonderful. And I think you can do whatever you want. And that was just such, like, a healing thing to experience through her. There's also great undiagnosed ADHD rep in this book with a diagnosis later. It's so good. The one thing I really struggled with is the third act breakup. And I'm not a third act breakup hater. I used to be, but after going through this period where it feels like most indie authors are avoiding it because the general public is like, life's so hard, I don't want our characters to break up. I'm not against it, but I just hated the way he spoke to her when they did break up. I hated it so much. I also felt like the timing of the breakup was kind of late in the book. It was definitely in the third act, but it was like 85% it felt like, and I would have preferred instead for it to have been a little earlier. And even if the same thing happened, I think if it had at least been a little earlier and we had a little bit of runway left at the end to feel good about them being back together again, instead of them getting back together and then 10 pages later getting hit with the epilogue, I think it would have been a little better. Because I just felt, you know, when you like nearly miss an accident, whether that's like physically in your car or like you trip and like your life just kind of flashes before your eyes and you just got to take some more steps and just really think like, okay, I'm standing, I'm walking, like I'm okay. I felt like that as I was closing the book. When I would rather have felt, you know, that 15 minutes later when you're continuing your walk and you're like, oh, the sun's shining, it's so nice outside, it's this, it's that, and you're just kind of like, la 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 life. I would have preferred that. So that's my only complaint, really. I just thought that the resolution happened too quickly. So I have one DNF for the month, and it makes me very, very sad. Very sad. It's Say You'll Remember Me by Miss Abby Jimenez, which comes out Tuesday, April 1st. And the reason I DNF'd this is because over the course of what I think would amount to anywhere from 20 to 40 physical pages, it's hard to tell because I was reading on my Kobo, there are 3 references to Rhysand in the ACOTAR series, and that was just an immediate no for me. Not just because of who Sarah J. Maas is and the audacity she had to use Breonna Taylor's murder for marketing of A Court of Silver Flames, but also because of the way it was used. So the first instance happens in chapter 2. Actually, if you don't want to know anything about this, skip to the next. I will have chapters where I talk about what I'm currently reading in April. But if you don't care, I'm going to talk about it. So the first instance happens in chapter 2. Chapter 1, we do not get a character description of Xavier, who is our MMC. We do get a character description of Samantha, the FMC. So in chapter 1 is from Xavier's point of view, so he's not going to describe himself, right? Chapter 2 is from Samantha's point of view. She does describe him, but not really. She's on the phone, I think, with her sister or maybe her best friend, and she's talking about how he donates to the GoFundMe she set up. The whole reason they meet is she finds this cat. It's like a 5-week-old cat, and it doesn't have a butthole. Which, if you think about the digestive system, that cat's going to die without a butthole. And she had taken the cat into the vet to him, and he was like, listen, the humane thing to do is to put this cat down if you can't afford to have the surgery. And he's also like, there's also no guarantee that the surgery is actually going to fix it, and this cat could die anyway, and then like it'd be a painful life and all those things. She wants to prove him wrong. She leaves. She starts a GoFundMe for the cat with a clever name. The internet does its thing, funds it. He finds the GoFundMe, and he donates $500 and comments, you were right. And so later she is talking to her sister about on the phone, and like this is happening, and she's like, oh my god, he donated. And she's like, what's annoying is not only was he mean, but he was hot, and somehow him being mean made him hotter. And her sister's like, oh, what's he look like? And she's like Rhysand, honestly, and then sends a photo of him to her. But that photo's not in the book. So I don't know what he looks like. And if I am not a person who reads romantasy, how am I supposed to know what Rhysand looks like? And I'm not one of those people who thinks that, like, you shouldn't put things in books that people shouldn't have to, like, Google. Because I do that all the time. I will go look something up if I'm not familiar. So I didn't really mind that as the initial instance. And I was, like, annoyed. I wish she had given a real description, but fine. Chapter 3. Okay? Literal 5 pages later. Maybe 10. We are back in Xavier's point of view. We're in the vet clinic, and Samantha has come in with a cat for, I think she's trying to get like a sedative or something because she's going to fly cross country with the cat, and also like a medical clearance to show the airline. He asks her out. She says yes. She leaves, and his vet techs are like, why are you smiling? What's going on? You're blushing. And he's like, oh, we have a date later. And they're commenting on his demeanor because he's kind of a standoffish guy. He's really tall and kind of cold. And one of them calls him a vampire, and the other one says that he's like Rhysand. And let me read what she says specifically. She says, because he's all cold and handsome and dangerous looking. Which is a fine enough example, but it's still not. Like, that's a quality thing. That doesn't tell me what he looks like, I guess. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it still feels half-assed. And then, in the same chapter, like 5 pages later, he's on the phone with this girl, Becca, who is his friend's girlfriend, because he wants the opinion of a woman he trusts. And he's like, hey, am I intimidating? And she goes on to say, like, yeah, you're a hulking dude who doesn't smile, and you are kind of standoffish, and you do exude this particular kind of vibe. And so he's starting to feel down, and she goes, but you're also really caring, and you show up for the people who need you, and you're responsible, and you're this and you're that. And she's like talking him up, and you can just kind of tell in the scene that he's slowly starting to melt, and he's starting to have some confidence in himself, and he does feel like it's okay for him to go out with Samantha, and that like he's kind of like worth it. And so it's just very classic Abby Jimenez. And then on the next fucking page, the girl is rattling off things, and the last thing she says is embrace your inner Rhysand. And I put my Kobo down because it was the end of the chapter, and I was like, that was so fucking stupid. And the reason I felt that way is in all of that description of him, nothing screams, I read popular romantasy books in my spare time. Nothing about him gives that. This is a man who has no fun in his life. This is a man who literally 3 pages later, when they're on their date and Samantha's like, what do you do for fun? And he's like, I ran a spay and neuter clinic. That's his idea of fun. So what I'm hearing is this man reads medical journals in his spare time. Maybe he watches the X-Files. Maybe he'll goof around and read, I don't know, The Wager by David Grand. Like, he just gives those vibes. So how would he know who Rhysand is? Because again, the vet tech did not explain who that was to him. She said it to him as if he should just know. The friend in the car does not explain who that is to him. Just says it as if he should know. There is no world in the context clues we get that he knows who that is. It makes literally no sense. And if it wasn't from a series that I find problematic, like an author I find problematic, and it was just from like any other series that's like well known, I still would be annoyed about this. Because it's just poor writing. Like, there wasn't even an effort. Like, I was trying to brainstorm. I was like, what would I do if I wanted to fix this, right? Like, let's say I didn't care that this was being used, and I was like, okay, leave the references in, let's fix it. On the vet tech one, what I probably would have done, instead of her just randomly calling him that, is I probably would have had him coming out of the exam room he was in with Samantha to, like, see them chilling around, like, the desk, right? And, like, have one of them being, like, sneakily reading A Court of Mist and Fury at the desk, and he'd be like, what did I tell you about reading? And she could have been like, oh, whatever, you grumpy High Lord, or whatever, and just like made a reference to it, right? But it would have brought in a purpose for saying that. Or even the girl on the phone, you know, if he even just made a reference to her, like, of like, who is that? This is the second time in an hour that someone has called me that. Who is this dude? And then, like, she explained to him. Just something. Give me something to connect him into being called that, because he just doesn't acknowledge it. And I wouldn't maybe either if I didn't know who that was. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And it just felt really lazy. And then I had seen some other reviews about some other choices made in this book that ultimately made me go, this one's not for me. And not all Abby Jimenez is for me. I've had an up and down relationship with her books, and so I was perfectly fine to leave this one alone and to move on. So I started Crash Landing by Annie McQuaid after that. I'm maybe 30 pages into that one, and I'm liking it so far. A girl runs into her ex-boyfriend at the airport on her way to the Bahamas for her best friend's wedding. Her ex-boyfriend is her best friend's cousin. I don't know why she didn't think she'd run into him, but as she's talking to the best friend about having run into him, the best friend does make the comment about how, like, they had kind of kindled their relationship, because although he is her cousin, whatever happens, I still don't know what happened, whatever happened, he also stopped talking to the cousin and her family, so I can now understand a little why she was shocked that he was coming to the wedding. But they're about to get into, like, a 2-seater plane that he's going to fly to get them to the Bahamas, because their plane that arrived had, like, mechanical issues or something, and so then the flights are canceled, and it's, like, a whole thing. So it's cute so far, but I'm also only 30 pages in, so I don't really have real feelings. I also have No Ordinary Love by Maya Ariel queued up. That one is loosely based on the, like, publicist-generated relationship between Mariah Carey and Derek Jeter from, like, the 90s. So is lightly sports romance with a famous singer who, I think she's going through a divorce and is trying to keep things hush-hush, and I think also trying to give the semblance that she's, like, moved on. And then there's The Last Session by Julia Bartz, which I can't fully remember what this is about. It's either about therapy or writing, but it's like a retreat situation kind of again, kind of like the writer's retreat. I also have a Romantasy House of Blight on my TBR, and 6 Days in Bombay, which was that historical fiction book that I got that's set in India. And then I also really want to read Wild and Wrangled by Lila Sage this month. It's the last book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series, which is so crazy to say. I love that series so much, and I cannot believe it's coming to an end. So I am going to leave this here. My throat has been swollen all morning. I think it's allergies, and so I sound kind of off. So thank you for embracing that and dealing with that. I'm going to leave you guys here and get back to reading. So leave an emoji that represents your favorite food or snack. Leave that. I'm watching a lot of March Madness. It's been a big snacky time for me. It's been a lot of popcorn for me. If there's a popcorn emoji, feel free to leave that. But if that's not your deal and one of the other emojis fits better, leave that in the comments and tell me what you are looking forward to reading in April. And I will see you in another video soon.